ഡൽഹിയിലെയും ബീഹാറിലെയും വോട്ടർമാരെ മാത്രം ലക്ഷ്യം വെച്ചുള്ള ഒരു ബജറ്റ് അത് ഈ വരുന്ന തെരഞ്ഞെടുപ്പുകളിൽ ലക്ഷ്യം വെച്ചിട്ടുള്ളതാണെന്ന് മനസ്സിലാക്കാൻ ഇരുത്തി ചിന്തിക്കുകയൊന്നും വേണ്ട. ഈ രണ്ട് സംസ്ഥാനങ്ങൾക്കും കൈനിറയെ നൽകിക്കൊണ്ട് BJP പണിതുയർത്താൻ നോക്കുന്നത് ഫേക്ക് ഇന്ത്യയാണെന്ന് തുറന്നടിക്കുകയാണ് ശശി തരൂർ. തൊഴിൽ ഇല്ലായ്മയും പണപ്പെരുപ്പവും എന്നീ വാക്കുകളെ കുറിച്ച് ഒരക്ഷരം പോലും കേട്ടില്ല എന്നും ബജറ്റിനെതിരെ ആഞ്ഞടിച്ചുകൊണ്ട് അദ്ദേഹം പറഞ്ഞു. കൂടാതെ കേരളത്തിന് ഉദാരമായ ബജറ്റ് അല്ല ഇതെന്നും തുറന്നു കാണിച്ചു. കേന്ദ്ര ബജറ്റിനെയും നിർമ്മല സീതാരാമനെയും PTIക്ക് നൽകിയ അഭിമുഖത്തിൽ തുറന്നടിക്കുന്ന ശശി തരൂരിന്റെ വീഡിയോ ദൃശ്യങ്ങൾ കാണാം.
To PTI for a chat on the budget. So what do you make of the budget? Do you think that enough has been done on the concerns that the Congress has raised about unemployment and inflation?
We didn't even hear the words unemployment or inflation from the finance minister today. It was a mercifully short speech, but she didn't use either of those words, which is not so merciful. I mean, the fact is, yes, I suppose if you have a job and you have a salary and you're earning 12 lakhs or less, you have every reason to be happy. But if you don't have a job, it's not particularly clear from this budget where that job is going to come from. If you're living in Bihar and you're from an allied party, no doubt you get a SOP that will help you with your elections, which is a very curious message, actually, that this government has sent. A middle-class tax cut for the Delhi voter and lots of freebies for Bihar. But this is the same party that talks about one nation, one election. I'm sure the people in Andhra Pradesh are thinking, if we also had an election at this time, we might have got some freebies too. So good to have different elections in different years, because then Bihar benefits more than it would otherwise have done from a uniform scale. Those are the kinds of disappointments. But broadly speaking, what are the major challenges facing the economy? We have a major unemployment issue. Youth unemployment is at record levels, and even college-educated youth are facing large levels of unemployment. What's been done for that? Not clear from what we heard this morning. Second, you hear talk of manufacturing and exports, but for manufacturing to pick up, you need investment. Where is investment going to come from? There's no acknowledgement that FDI is fleeing this country and has been now for some time, that domestic investment is stagnant. No one is putting more money into the economy. Without that, where will manufacturing go up? Where will jobs be generated? Where will exports go? You're looking at the situation now where manufacturing has plunged below 20% of GDP. I think it was over 25% in UPA, and we were trying to improve it. Now it's gone in the opposite direction. So there are some real concerns that despite all the slogans and perhaps the good intentions of the government, that we don't really have the kind of results that we're not seeing in any case from this statement of the finance minister, the kind of prospects of addressing these issues. And I think we'll really have to wait and see once we've gone through the fine print. And I'm sure you'll all be hearing from our party later in the day. Mr. Chidambaram will hold a press conference as usual. But at the moment, on a quick look and just having heard the speech in the House, I didn't get the sense that these fundamental issues have been fully addressed.
So you've touched upon this. I would like you to elaborate on it. Do you think that this is more like an election budget aimed at Delhi polls and Bihar elections, and less economically prudent and taking the economy forward?
Well, look, to take the economy forward, there are some broader challenges that need to be addressed. Now, she said she's going to come up with some tax proposals later beyond this as well. But if you look objectively at what's happening in our economy, there is a serious crisis of lack of investment, compounding a serious problem of unemployment and underemployment in our country. GDP growth has dropped. It's now, they are projecting in the economic survey 6.4%, which is well below what they talked about last year. But in any case, if you want to get to that Viksit Bharat that the Prime Minister talks about by 2047, you need 8% every year from now to then. So each year that you slip below that, you're dropping. If you look at the overall figure she mentioned for fiscal deficit of 4.8%, it's actually slightly shocking, because we all remember Arun Jaitley announcing in Parliament a staggered goal towards getting down to 3% fiscal deficit. Now it's 4.8 on the 11th year of this government's term. So clearly their targets have slipped. Across the board, it looks like many of their aspirations have remained aspirational, have not been fulfilled, and the economy and the Aam Aadmi is still hurting. That's the problem we're all facing in the economy. And I'm not sure that the finance minister's speech sufficiently addressed that for us all to feel reassured that the government is coming to grips with the problem.
Sir, you just mentioned it that the government keeps talking about their goal towards moving towards a Viksit Bharat, but not doing enough on unemployment and inflation. Do you think all this talk of Viksit Bharat remains a pipe dream?
Look, as far as Viksit Bharat is concerned, it's an aspiration, and an aspiration is always good to have, but the glide path to get there has to be also realistic. If you're talking about even becoming a country with a 13,000 per capita income instead of the 5,000 we currently have, less than 5,000 we currently have, we're about 4,000 and change, then I think you'll need to have sustained growth. And we're not seeing enough indications of where that growth will come from. If anything, the overall assessment of our economy right now is of slowing growth. And I didn't hear enough today that will reverse that particular phenomenon.
Sir, the Congress came out with a real state of the economy report
That's
a couple of days ago, and it said that the government is marching the country towards a middle income trap. And it also stated that the economy is in a slowdown. What's your assessment of the state of the economy right now? Do you also fear that, if this continues, we could go into a recession?
Look, recession is still a bit of a distance away. Recession is negative growth in at least 2 successive quarters, and we're not there yet. But I will say that there has been a slowdown, that's very clear. Even a slowdown from the projections of this government last year and this year, you can see there's been a slowdown. The other problem is that there are some structural issues in the economy we have been hearing more and more about from outside critics who are looking at our system. But even some inside critics like the former chief economic advisor, the former deputy governor of the Reserve Bank, they have come out and criticized, for example, this government's preference for so-called national champions, where a handful of companies are being given all sorts of encouragement to create monopolies or duopolies in a number of sectors, which becomes a disincentive for other companies to invest because they fear that the rules will favor these big fellows whom the government likes because the government wants to create national champions. Now, the problem with that is if the smaller companies don't invest or they feel that their investments will be more at risk because arbitrary rule changes might favor the big players who are going to be the national champions, then that lack of investment will prevent growth and will prevent employment increases. These are some of the fundamental challenges. There's also been a widespread concern about tax terrorism, the weaponization of the tax agencies, the whole lot of them, IT, revenue intelligence, ED, all of them, customs, all of them have been weaponized and in ways which unfortunately seem to be driving businesses away. It's a startling fact that $23,000 millionaires left this country and became NRIs last year. Can we afford to see this kind of hemorrhage? Clearly not. We need to retain these people here and get them to invest in our country. For that, the government has to change its entire approach, which it's not been doing.
You just mentioned tax terrorism. Congress has been repeatedly saying that there is tax terrorism going on under this government. Today, Finance Minister has given a big handout to the middle class by increasing the slab to 12 lakh. So how do you look at that? Do you think that will improve the situation for the middle class?
If you've got a job and you've got a salary of up to 12 lakh, it will improve your situation, certainly. But if you don't have a job, your problems are not addressed. If your income is somewhat higher than a lakh a month and you're still very much middle class, we'll have to see how much you benefit. The real problem with this whole business of the government's approach on this tax benefit is that it only addresses one aspect of the country. And certainly with elections coming up in Delhi, where a substantial number of voters may well benefit, that's clearly going to help the BJP to attract their votes. Just as you saw a number of freebies being announced for Bihar, it's going to also try and get you votes in Bihar. But that kind of short-term thinking is not what we need at this point. We need something far more visionary to take this country out of the morass into which it may slowly be sinking.
Sir, there's been a lot of concern about Mr. Donald Trump talking about, bringing down tariffs. So how do you look at the government's approach on that front, while on one hand it has been saying that, it has good relations with the US. So do you think that India will be able to, tide over the Trump effect?
I hope so. I mean, Mr. Modi is talking about a visit to the States before too long. I think the Americans indicated might even happen this month. Mr. Trump, too, has been talking about possibly coming to India. So we're hopeful that they will be able to talk to each other and clear up any misunderstandings. But on the question of tariffs, Mr. Trump has been very clear that if India is going to impose any protectionist measures, America will retaliate and vice versa. So that is not going to be good for our exports. As it is, our exports have sunk below 20% of GDP, which is bad news because, our manufacturing has sunk below 20% of GDP, which is bad news, and you're not going to be able to export unless you increase your manufacturing. Now, on top of that, if your exports are also stagnating, which they have been, then tariffs will be a death knell. It will drop them even further. And this is going to be a matter of some concern for many, because we heard from the finance minister somewhat glib formula that essentially you're going to see growth in manufacturing, you're going to see growth in exports, and various incentive schemes are mentioned. The problem is that if investment isn't coming into manufacturing, how are you going to grow in exports? Where will the investment come from? Can the government plow money into everything? Clearly there's a limit to how much the government can do. Even in infrastructure, you've needed private players. In the other areas, you're not going to be able to manage without very, very significant investment that at the moment people are not willing to do.
So, Make in India first the government came out with, and now Congress is saying that they've sort of repackaged that in this budget. So do you think that still making India, a manufacturing hub remains a pipe dream with the government's policies?
It hasn't moved well enough, Asim. If you look, for example, at the whole vision that said that when capital flees China, it may come to us. We've not been able to take advantage of that. Barely 10% of the capital fleeing China has relocated into India. It's mainly gone to countries like Vietnam, Malaysia, and others. And this is even before Trump's election, when Trump has, of course, talked about his preference for jobs returning to America, and there'll be more onshoring and, of course, nearshoring, that is, countries like Canada and Mexico, provided they can escape the tariff net with America, may also get more capital flight from China. We have not seen any increase. If at a time when we were benefiting from so-called friendshoring, we had 10% of Chinese capital coming here, the capital leaving China coming here, how are we going to be able to say that our growth is preordained? The finance minister talked today of making us a global center for toy manufacturing. Our toy manufacturing has actually been given a kick because of Chinese toys coming into this country, flooding our market. Everyone knows this. How are we going to even recover the lost ground of the toys we used to make, let alone create an export market in toys, which is what was implied by the finance minister's statement? Unless people see confidence in being able to invest in India and getting toys made here even cheaper than China and better than China, that may remain a pipe dream. Look, we all want to aspire for the best for our country. I don't want to sort of blow smoke at the Viksit Bharat idea. Ultimately, we want to develop our country. But even to get to the stage of being a middle-income country, at the moment we are really not. We're a low to lower middle-income country. We will have to do very much better on all these parameters to see the kind of results that the government's fantasies appear to suggest are realistic. We've not seen the realistic path to get there.
So just last couple of questions. I'll allow myself a political question, though it's related to the economy. Sir, BJP vehemently criticized the Congress and other parties for, giving out handouts during the election, and Prime Minister called it raveries. Now, BJP in its manifesto has also made similar promises. So how do you look at this whole issue of freebies being given by political parties?
To be honest, I think it's becoming more and more unsustainable. This competitive populism means that if I was giving 1,000, you start giving 2,000, then I start giving 3,000, and the next thing you know, it's 5,000. Where is all this money coming from? It's coming from taxes. And already the tax burden is pretty high. I would suggest that especially now, it becomes very important to realize that at some point we'll have to call a halt to these things, or that these raveries will come at the expense of other government programs. The total amount of money available to the government is still finite. And there are vital programs that are being underfunded. MNREGA, which is so indispensable for the survival of people in the rural areas, MNREGA has been starved of funds, and as a result there are women waiting 7-8 months to get wages for work they've already done. Now, is that fair? Can the government go for short-term populism to win a state election today, while leaving people whose states may have voted already last year in limbo for months waiting for their salaries from MNREGA? It's not right. And the delayed payments from the government, from the central government to the states for Manrega are just one example of a genuine symptomatic problem, that they spend money on freebies and they don't think about the larger structural welfare measures that they've already committed to.
So my final question to you is an easy one. Everyone wants to hear what they say, terrorism. So how would you describe this budget in your own imitable style?
I think underwhelming on the whole. Underwhelming is perhaps not as strong a criticism as some others in my party might come up with, but it has not been up to the kind of problems we hoped they would address when the finance minister took the floor this morning.
വാഗമൺ സ്പൈസസ്. വാഗമണിലെ എല്ലാ ഒറിജിനൽ പ്രോഡക്ട്സും തിരുവനന്തപുരത്ത് ഒരു കുടക്കീഴിൽ ജ്യോതിപുരം ഫുഡ് സേഫ്റ്റി ഓഫീസിന്റെ മുൻവശത്ത് പ്രവർത്തനം ആരംഭിച്ചിരിക്കുന്നു. കശുവണ്ടി, കുരുമുളക്, ഗ്രാമ്പു, ഏലക്ക, പട്ട, കാഷ്യൂനട്ട്, നട്ട്സ്, ആൽമണ്ട് എന്നിവയെല്ലാം ഇവിടെ ലഭ്യമാണ്.
ബന്ധപ്പെടേണ്ട നമ്പർ 7994007599 അല്ലെങ്കിൽ 9656417599.